Web3 with Me is a discussion-style podcast about the ins and outs of Web 3.0, hosted by Zach French, known as Off Edge in the verse. From crypto to NFTs, DAOs to DeFi, we cover the abstract philosophical promises and the new business models enabled in this new decentralized world. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or watch the show on YouTube. Thanks and enjoy.
Zach French is a bar-certified attorney, and nothing expressed by Zach during Web3 with Me shall be considered legal advice. All the opinions expressed by Zach and his guests are solely their own opinions. All content in Web3 with Me is for informational purposes only. Zach and his podcast guests may maintain positions in the securities discussed during Web3 with Me.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for being listeners of Web3 with Me. I want to take a few seconds to tell you about my exciting new B2B offering. It is the mission here to educate. I sincerely believe Web3 can make the world better for more people. Businesses shouldn't be left out though, so I've launched the Web3 Coach. It's a bespoke education experience designed to help your team understand how Web3 affects your particular industry or company and identify opportunities unique to Web3. Whether you have a law or accounting firm with a growing number of clients participating in Web3 through crypto and NFTs, or you're a real estate syndicate looking for different ways to raise money, or teams just of fast-growing Web3 companies who want to understand your customers and your new teammates, I make sure you can talk the talk and leave feeling more confident about this crazy new world. Please take a minute to check out my website at theweb3coach.xyz. Thanks so much and enjoy the show. My guest today is Shahar Abrams. Shahar was one of the earliest Web3 educators in the Atlanta area, which is how we had the pleasure of meeting. A couple years into his consulting career with IBM, he read a book that would send him deep down the Web3 rabbit hole. He worked his way over to the enterprise blockchain team there and became a very active investor in Bitcoin, ultimately liquidating all of his funds from his first 5 years of working to put it in Bitcoin. He is one of my first guests with extensive DeFi experience and provides an amazing framework to think about it. Currently, he is head of product for Rodo, a company putting car titles on the blockchain. He is currently still conducting research to start a DeFi fund and producing a Web3 film. His consistent yet critical conviction in this space is fascinating. LFG baby, let's start vibing. Welcome to the show, Shahar. Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I was introduced to the Atlanta blockchain community through a Chainlink event and what you were on the panel of. You had some super awesome thoughts, so I'm glad to be able to expand on them a little bit in the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So we typically start off the episodes with a little bit about yourself. I call it your founding story. This is going to be a bit more about what makes you you rather than Web3. But if Web3 is part of that, then of course we're going to get to that too. So feel free to start wherever you want.
All right. Let me think for a second. So I have perhaps a bit of an unconventional background. Moved around a lot as a kid. My parents, when they named me Shahar, I think they thought we were going to live in Israel for our whole lives. It's a very common name in Israel. But that actually only lasted the first 5 years of my life. And then we moved to the US. And we wound up in Alabama, in Birmingham, Alabama. So that I think was very unexpected. I never really felt so at home in Alabama during my childhood. But then later on, I sort of started to appreciate it more for what it was. And I think it took me actually leaving to come to that realization. I went to a pretty unconventional high school. It was like an arts high school, small magnet school that was in Birmingham. I studied theater. I wanted to be an actor. And I think it was my dad who sort of disabused me of that notion early on. And whether he meant to or not, sort of just scared me into a more practical career choice. which for me was, I didn't know what that was, but I wanted to go to business school. I was excited by the concept of, building things in the real world and doing, business things. So I studied finance. I have an uncle who's in finance, who, I think had a big influence on me, and his career always seemed really impressive. And so I studied finance in school as a thought that I would, work in some investment bank or do something like that. And that I got disabused of probably around junior year. I realized that, working 60 to 80 hours at something like a Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan wasn't going to do it for me either. And so I kind of went a little bit back to the drawing board. And I ended up applying for a bunch of consulting jobs after college. And pretty much consulting is what you do when you don't really know what you want to do. And it's a good way to kind of cop out from that. Because you get to try a bunch of different projects, right? That's the idea. And these consulting companies sell you on that you can try a bunch of different things. You can see kind of what you like. You can try different functions, and it's true. I think it's a really good experience for that. And my experience at IBM was, probably 80 to 90% positive through the first few years. I became sort of an Excel jockey and did a few projects with the federal government. I was in DC. I'd gone to school in DC to kind of get out of Alabama. And when I got a job in DC, I stuck around, and I ended up staying there for another 6-7 years, working in the federal sector consulting practice of IBM. And so I wasn't, I was still looking, during this time. And there were a couple of times when I was on projects that I wasn't really happy about at IBM. And that's when, I really was, taking a hard look in the mirror and trying to figure out what it was that really appealed to me. One thing I kind of landed on was gaming, because, like any kind of boy my age, I was really into gaming, spent a lot of time on it in my early 20s. And it occurred to me that, maybe I'd work for a gaming company. So I went that route. I applied to Riot Games, the maker of very popular game, League of Legends, and made it pretty far with them, and flew out to their campus and didn't end up getting the job. And so was a little deflated by that. Then they actually gave me a second chance at that job. They actually interviewed me again, and I still didn't get it, which was even more deflating. And yeah, they called me back and were like, "Oh, we'd love to have you apply again," and then they just told me no again. And it was shortly after that I found crypto Web3, and it wasn't really called Web3 then in 2017. But it was something that I had heard about at IBM. I'd also was aware about it from my college days, having some friends that used things like Silk Road. So I'd heard about Bitcoin before, but never had really dove into it. And I don't know exactly what made me sort of take the leap. Maybe it was a bit of a mixture of boredom or a disappointment from not getting the job I just applied to. But I bought this book off Amazon. It's called Blockchain for Business, which I thought was an applicable way for me to get into it. It was written by William Mugayer, who was a guy written in 2016, by the way. By William Mugayer, who had participated in the Ethereum ICO, was friends with Vitalik Buterin. The foreword in the book was actually from Vitalik, who I had never heard about before. When I read the foreword, that was the first thing I ever read by Vitalik, and I was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And the first chapter of that book was basically an overview of the Bitcoin white paper, and I'll never forget the experience of reading that. I was on an airplane. flying out of DC. And by the time the plane landed, I knew that this is what I had been looking for. This is what I wanted to focus my career on. And this is what I wanted to put my money behind. I knew that too immediately. So it was a really sort of transformational moment. And I, totally, it was like night and day, from the plane taking off to the plane landing. I had read, I hadn't put the book down. I had read several chapters of it, but it only took that first chapter. And I think that the concept that really got me was this idea of a trust layer, right, was a term that Mugair used pretty frequently. And the kind of thesis of the book was that this new technology that provided, this online trust layer was going to worm its way into every sort of business process and be incredibly disrupted. And it made total sense to me. It explained smart contracts. It explained, permissionless peer-to-peer networking. It explained these concepts of, money that we had all taken for granted. And so it was really, really powerful. And I just remember I knew immediately. I looked up the price of Bitcoin and I was like, I'm going to buy this. And I had, and it's going to do really well. I kind of knew that too. And I immediately became kind of an evangelist. And then I immediately, continued to go down the rabbit hole, right? And I knew this is what I wanted my career to be about. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew that, this technology is something I wanted to be heavily involved in. And I think the other thing I also realized was, how monumental of a change this would be and how difficult it would be and how much backlash there would be. And I think a lot of people have this experience when you get the key concepts around Web3 and blockchain and Bitcoin, you realize how seminal, of a change it is and how unprecedented it is to really, take the reins of money and make money into a truly free and open system. It's just something that's never really been done before. I think the closest comparison to it could be, thousands of years ago during the Roman times when gold was kind of this widely used currency and it wasn't really centrally controlled and everyone could kind of trade with gold. And so, not to get too off topic, but that to me, I kind of saw all of these things. I saw that it would be a really, deep, difficult, interesting pursuit. And so I spent, the next several months investing. It was we were in the throes of kind of this bull market. People were starting to get really excited. Bitcoin went from 3,000 to 10,000, and it was very volatile. Eventually had that kind of blow off top in December of 2017. And I had never really, I'd always liked the idea of investing. I mean, I did study finance. I, bought some stocks in college, and I would, join the quarterly earnings report calls, and I would listen in and think I was, some sophisticated investor. But really, I had, no idea what I was doing. I think I bought Amazon stock, was one of the stocks that I bought. One of the first stocks I bought at maybe like $400. I sold it at $600. And so I didn't really know what I was doing. But now crypto made it much more real and personal for me. And so I started paying a lot more attention. I started really getting excited, and, I slowly put more and more money in, right? And in 2017, 2018, I made the classic mistake of, I was lucky because I got in at a really good time, just when I happened to really have it click for me. And the market was, on its way up. It had been going up for a while, but, it kept going up, and I made a whole lot of money. I felt insanely rich. I think, I made like $100,000, which at the time I was like 25 or 26. And that was a whole lot to me, more than I'd ever had. And so I felt great. And then obviously through 2018, 2019, I saw that all bleed away. And that was a very difficult experience for me personally. And, it was something that really dialed me in even more, actually. I had a great benefit, which is I had this great clarity that this is what I wanted to do. And that, I really, obviously I was in it to make money like everyone else, but it was secondary. And I kind of always knew that, and I adopted, a very long-term view. And I knew, that, this was a technology, and this was a sea change that would take many years to play out. So so I was long-term oriented from the beginning, and that gave me the conviction to sort of keep investing, right, even through the 18-19 bear market, and keep learning. And I eventually, after about a year of trying and bothering people at IBM, I eventually was able to join IBM's new federal sector blockchain practice that we had stood up, and I was able to start working on blockchain implementations in the real world around real use cases for federal government clients. So without getting to, I can talk more about projects that we did there before. And it's interesting because now I've actually sort of come full circle, not in terms of working on government projects specifically, but working on enterprise blockchain solutions with a company that I recently joined. And so I just to go quickly through the rest of the story. I spent a couple of years building blockchain pilots with IBM for federal clients. There were ups and downs there. It was a challenging process. COVID really put a dent in that when that hit. It cratered the budget of the agency we were working for, which really put our project on hold. That was a source of some frustration. Then we had, the bull market of 2020, 2021 really take my portfolio places I never thought it would go. And I made the decision at the beginning of 21 to focus more on the public, side of crypto. I've been working mostly on the enterprise and permission side, working with things like Hyperledger Fabric and at IBM, and I wanted to really dive more into things like Ethereum and Cardano, which I was, part of at the time, and of course Bitcoin and many, other projects. And so I left IBM and I just became sort of a full-time degen researcher and educator. I moved to Atlanta. I started meetup groups here, and I was really passionate about spreading the word on this technology and this ecosystem, and what I was increasingly seeing as a movement, right, around Web3 and this technology. And so I started meetup groups here in Atlanta. I started doing some educational stuff. I worked on a course for a few months in 2021, released that to pretty little fanfare. Marketing has never been one of my strong suits. And so, and there were also pretty big challenges around marketing any sort of crypto content in like a course format on YouTube. And so and in other places. So I ran into that, got a bit burned out of that, and decided I really just wanted to do more researching, do more participating in things like DAOs, get deeper into the NFT space, and just spend more time, learning on my own. And that out of that sort of grew, I started doing some consulting privately for startups in the public ecosystem around people I'd met, in the NFT space, in DeFi, projects I've been involved in since 2018, 2019. As an investor and community member, I started to get more involved and actually do some projects for them. And, I got really deep into DeFi and did some pretty cool stuff in DeFi. I used a platform called Abracadabra to take a large, over collateralized loan, bought some things IRL, While, I found it amazing where I could do that and still earn interest on my collateral. This was like a really cool use case to me. For DeFi, I wrote an article about that for the Defiant, and kept I guess just kept messing around with applications, things in DeFi. Kept doing classes, kept doing some advising and consulting, and was sort of just floating around, right, and chilling out, frankly. And once again, I think the bear market caught me a little bit off guard. And it's funny, looking back at the progression of myself as an investor from 2017, 2018, knowing nothing about risk management and sort of just riding everything completely back down, not having this concept of risk management, I guess, frankly, to this prior cycle to where I did have this in mind, right? And I knew, about risk management. I knew I had to do things like take profit. I knew, these type of things. So I did a lot better, and I had this idea of a risk management framework in place. Yet I was not able to, in my mind, adequately sort of execute on it. So it's one thing to, know you need to do risk management, and that's another thing to actually put the things in place, right, to execute on performing that risk management in your personal portfolio. And so that was something I certainly could have done better. And it became another learning experience, and I felt much the same way as I did in 2018, which was, kind of funny and also frustrating, because I remembered, it's painful, to lose so much money, and having it, happen to you sort of again, even if you've done like sort of better, is for me, someone I try to hold myself to a higher standard, and I was a little bit miffed, and so that again, motivated me to, keep work harder and start some new projects, and I decided to. There's an opportunity to join a startup that was working on a real use case back in the permission blockchain space that I was a really good fit for, considering my experience with IBM. And I've joined them as head of product, and we're building, I think, something that hopefully will be really positive for overall adoption of this technology, which is what I really care about. And so that sort of brings us to the present day. There's a bunch of other things I'm working on, but I've been talking for a while, so maybe I'll stop and we can dive into whatever it is you want, Zach.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It was extensive, but it was useful because as I was listening to you, I see a lot of parallels between your experience and a lot of my guests' experience. But mainly, one thing I want to start with double clicking on is, what was your experience purchasing Bitcoin in 2017? Was it easy for you? Were you on a centralized exchange? What was that like?
Yeah, it was pretty easy. I just went through Coinbase. That was the only place I knew at the time. And so, yeah, it actually wasn't hard. I didn't do any self-custody stuff. I kept everything on Coinbase. I think it wasn't until 2018 that I got a bit more into self-custody, and I bought like a ledger. In the beginning, I was just buying on Coinbase, and I was just on it on various exchanges, and I was degenning, and I went on to Bittrex and Binance, and this is where my crypto basically was.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, to see, I mean, you can follow some of the most influential voices in the space with much bigger audiences than either you or I have, and they may have sold in 2018. So I find it like very, very cool that you were able to maintain that level of conviction, because as I've studied investing just like you have, um, psychology is the biggest part of it. I mean, a lot of people can have an inkling as to what the future might be. And as you kind of alluded to in this bear market, there's a difference between knowing what to do and actually doing it, right? There's a beautiful book. I don't know if you've ever read The Psychology of Money.
No, I haven't.
Morgan Housel, great read, but just the highest level synopsis of it is there's really two skills that people have. They have the ability to earn money, and they have the ability to keep money. Is one of the big lessons from the book. And he just went on Bankless podcast and did, and this is someone I think doesn't hold any crypto, but that psychology of making money while it is fast tracked in crypto is still the same, just as it would be for someone investing in index funds. Right.
Yeah, there's another great quote, which is making money is really easy. The hard part is keeping it.
Yeah. Which is fair. I mean, that's the difference between, normal people and Warren Buffett, right? Like that ability to just stay the course. But that's pretty cool that you kept the conviction. So were you just dollar cost averaging that whole time, basically when 2018 hit, just continuing?
Yeah, pretty much. And I didn't have a strict dollar cost averaging plan, like people, including me, say that you're supposed to. So it's not like every month I was clockwork going in and just buying a little bit. It ended up being a bit like that because I would, every paycheck I would put it in, and I got paid on a consistent basis. So yeah, every month I would put in, but then slowly, what I was doing also is I was selling all of my other traditional investments here and there to go in as well. And so I sold um, I sold all my mutual funds. I sold my stock investments. I ended up selling my IBM stock, my company stock. I ended up selling my 401k. I just, there is no other place I wanted to be. And I think and that, was very risky, but it obviously worked out for me. But in my mind, it was a very calculated risk. It's something I actually did think a lot about and did very intentionally. And to me, the idea was, and this is, not everyone's like this, but I like to be, I'm an activist investor. I want to be hands-on investing my portfolio, and I want to know what I own. Right. And so in the case of mutual funds, right, the idea is you buy a basket of good stocks, and you just wait and you let someone else manage it for you. You might not know what you even hold. But you're going to do okay, right? You're not going to get killed. You're not going to do spectacularly, but you're not going to lose sleep, and that's great. And that's great for lots of people, right? But I came to this realization that I also thought in my pride and arrogance that I had this key insight that that people weren't really getting, that this technology was way bigger and way more important than people really realized, and I really felt that I had this kind of edge just in sort of knowing that, right, with such high conviction. That, I guess, is what conviction is, right? To think that.
And you have to have a bit of hubris to stay the course.
Yeah, and it was also grounded on some reality because I was working in the space, and one thing I think what built my conviction the most, frankly, was going to conferences through 2018 and 2019, and talking, meeting other people in the space. Really, I would just say meeting other people in the space, whether it was at a conference or it was just somewhere around DC where I found a meetup group, or it was someone in the industry, or it was just on YouTube watching people that had been in the space for a while, like Andreas Antonopoulos, or these other people that had high conviction, and hearing their passion, right, and their conviction, and meeting people that were really building, right, and that weren't focused on the price, right. I had never, I had never been in an industry where everyone was so passionate and so smart and so convicted, right, in what we were doing, and that we all shared this vision of this is so much bigger, than what it is now, and this is a multi-year journey, and we are going after the mediation of value in society, like as a whole. It's such a big idea, and so seeing that, and then simultaneously, when you read all the doom and gloom stuff that people are writing, no one is on that thread, right? No one's on that thread. So there was this massive disconnect, and that's what gave me, and still does give me, massive conviction in this space. Is I don't think I think it's discounted, just how strong the movement is, and how many, frankly, really smart people we have working in this space. Um, And so that, is what did and still does, give me all this conviction, and that, insight that I felt like I had, right, was what made me feel like this was a better investment for me than holding all these mutual funds. And I was also in a position, right, like you, I'm sure I read all these, books on investment theory and the idea of like, oh, well, when you're young, you can take these, bigger risks. And so I just, went full into that. And as someone in their, mid to late 20s, with a good corporate job, with no debt, thankfully, with, single, with no kids or dependents, no one I had to take care of. I mean, all of that stuff was quite fortunate, right? And that's a big part of it, right? So, I was able to kind of go in pretty hard, and I was able to mentally take that risk of, I'm betting the first 5 years, of my income from my career on this idea. And, if it works out, then, I jump ahead several years, towards retirement, or towards, my financial goals, let's say. And if I'm wrong, then, I've lost 5 years of income, and I'm going to keep working same as I was before. And, that's it. Right. So I made that calculated risk. I don't think it was, of course, everyone told me I was crazy, when I would tell them I'm 90%.
I was going to say, what did your parents
And,
say? Did you talk to them about it?
Oh yeah, they told me I was crazy. My uncle in finance told me I was crazy. My coworkers told me I was crazy. Everyone did. They were very. The only people that didn't tell me I was crazy, and there were still exceptions though, were people in crypto, right? That shared my cult-like conviction.
It brings up a good point though, because if you think about it, you've got to balance, the groupthink mentality with reality. But it sounds like you started off with so much conviction yourself without even meeting these people that when you went there, it was almost like a reinforcement, right? Rather than like
that's a very good point. There's certainly groupthink going on, and groupthink goes both ways. On the one hand, there was the groupthink of it must be crazy. Who would do this? This technology is a scam. And on the other hand, there's a groupthink that, this will solve everything, right? And so, it is a balance, and I've failed at that balance. Usually on this will solve everything side, right? Because that's what I'm prone to, and that's come back to bite me, on a few occasions, both personally as an investor and professionally. In my time as IBM, thinking, we can apply this to everything, and then learning, actually, no, you can't. Right.
We're still having that conversation today. In fact, I'd say it's one of the most relevant conversations right now.
Right.
Everybody that you talk to that is genuinely open-minded, I would say, like, yes, there is the occasion for the you're crazy, just like flat out. I don't even want to hear it. But there is just a lot of really smart people that I talk to. Most of them are in tech. That are willing to see an alternative future based on this technology, but are having trouble finding the real applications for it, and won't take Bitcoin as an alternative currency as just the only application, right? Like we're talking, how are the smart contracts going to apply? What is Ethereum actually going to do other than create new speculative assets?
And that is an area that I feel good about now, having gone through sort of the trials and, since 2018, been thinking about that, how to apply different use cases in a, both in an enterprise, situation and out in the wild. I will say I'm now much, much more discerning than I was 3 years ago, even 1 year ago. Every year I think I get a bit more discerning about, well, what can this actually work for, and what's actually a really good use case. And I think that's what made me, valuable to startups and other kind of thing, because I can now look people in the eye and tell them, this is a crazy idea. You don't need Web3 for this or something like that, right?
What are some of the? Do you have any off the top of your head that, without like discrediting anybody, that where you're just like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I'm trying to call out something or make a point as more of a broad concept, but generally you need. I'll just be high level. Like you generally only need, what does Web3 solve, right? Ultimately, it solves coordination between parties that are, for whatever reason, uncoordinated. Usually they're uncoordinated because of data. Sometimes it can be uncoordinated because of rules, right? Or, and so what Web3 helps you to do is to bring that, together and create kind of an incentive based system, a value based system at a network level, create a rules based system at a network level, right? And then, be able to apply that. So what you really want to look for is network level problems, right? Problems that, are right bigger than just a single company or a single actor, in an ecosystem, and solve some sort of coordination problem there. And then, you still have to ask the question, could we solve this? Do we need a distributed ledger, right? To put data has to be some part of it, right? Because if data is not some part of it, you can make a rules manifesto and just agree to follow it, and you don't need to do all this crazy engineering, right? So I think that's the key, right? You have to have data coordination issues between multiple parties in the ecosystem.
That's interesting, and kind of begs the normal question that I ask, which is how you describe Web3. I think you just described how Web3 might apply. Is there anything else in terms of describing Web3 to people that you typically use to help them grasp it, other than the typical read, write, tone?
What I've become a big fan of using through a lot of trial and error is describing Web3 as a concept of the Internet of Value. And obviously, I didn't come up with this. But it's a really elegant description because you can parallel it to what came before, right? So Web 2, and people are really familiar with Web 2 now, right? And everybody knows, we use these applications every day and they're a big part of our lives. And so Web 2 is the Internet of Information, right? And the way I like to explain it and think about it is that, before Web 2, we had these gatekeepers of information, right? Because we had to. We didn't have a way to really, really efficiently, make information flow, at the scale of, the world, right? And Web 2 gave us that ability, right? The simplest example is a text message, right? Text messaging is permissionless. You can now, just with someone's 10-digit phone number, right, you can send them information, right? Now you can send them almost any type of information, just with that data. Same with email, right? And so that's very easy to grasp. And now, when you think of Web3, well, we have a different number. It's longer than 10 digits, but this is now your wallet address. And rather than your destination where you get information, it's your destination where you get value. And so if I know your wallet address, all I need is an internet connection. And now I can send you value. I can send you money. I can send you NFTs. I can send you, assets. And so that's the massive, the simplest way to explain it, right? That's the massive sea change that we have. We've moved from, sending information to phone numbers to sending value to wallets at this permissionless global scale.
That's awesome. That's a great way of explaining it. And it's unique too. You being the 21st episode of the podcast as the first time that anybody's ever explained. They've explained it as value, but not in that way with that comparison. So thanks for sharing that. One thing I wanted to hop into is DeFi. I haven't had a lot of guests in DeFi. I have done hours of research on it. I still feel like I don't know shit, to be frank. What could you provide? Just like, I know that you were very into it and you talked about specific experiences with Abracadabra. Is there like general frameworks other than just like it's like money Legos that you use to help teach people and also to help yourself learn by breaking it down to certain components and learning, where the tech is developing and where it's struggling and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Great way. And I've done a lot of education on this in Atlanta. And so hopefully I've arrived at some pretty good ways to explain it too. But the way I like to explain DeFi is, it's just Fi, right? Finance. But we've applied, this open access, permissionless, transparent framework to it. So the idea, and here's how I sort of like to begin here. You can think of let's look at Web 2, right? So in Web 2, you had these massive success stories like Uber and Airbnb, right? So what did they do? Well, Uber became the largest taxi company in the world, and they didn't have to own any cars, right? Because they just coordinated sort of a network via using information. Here's where your passengers are. Here's where you need to take them. Here's the best route, and we'll just connect you, right? Right. They applied that to the problem. Airbnb did the same thing. They just made it so anyone can provide their actual assets, right, and can be, can act like a hotel. And so Airbnb became the largest hotel company without them owning any real estate. DeFi has applied sort of the same model to finance. So in Uniswap, right, anyone can be a liquidity provider, right? And Uniswap is becoming, they aren't yet, right, but they have become one of the largest exchanges without owning any assets, right? They don't own any assets. They say, bring your own assets and you can participate in this right in this area. So just like you would bring your own car to go drive for Uber, you can bring now your own money to LP on Uniswap. Now, what does it mean to LP? So, and this requires, right, some knowledge of financial plumbing, right, because that's what this all is. You in the financial sector, right, there's kind of three key functions, right? There's payments. You have to be able to pay someone else, right? That's simple. There's exchange, right? If I have something, you want something, we have to be able to trade, and we have to decide what my asset is worth versus your asset, so we can trade these things and avoid, barter systems. And then there's lending and loans, right? So if I have a lot of money and you don't have a lot of money, and you have a great idea, you want money, right? And I'm not using my money right now, I can loan you my money, right? Earn a little bit of an interest rate, and you can go do what you need to do, right? Buy a house, start a business, right? Very, very important function, right? And that's existed for thousands of years. All these things existed for a very long time, right? And their proliferation has led to massive improvements in society, right? As we efficiently can allocate capital and allow people to build their good ideas, right? So we're just taking those same functions, right, and we're making them more accessible and more permissionless, right? So now anyone can be a lender, right? Anyone can facilitate exchange, right? Anyone can be a market maker. So in this exchange function, right, to circle back to what I was talking about earlier, right, in order to allow for these exchange of assets, what you have to do, you have to kind of have inventory, right? You have to have I have to have a certain, if I'm trying to buy bananas and, I have oranges, well, we have to have a stock of bananas and a stock of oranges so that if someone wants to trade some, someone is providing that to allow for the exchange. That's called market making. This is an activity that is relegated to a certain few financial institutions, right, that would do this, and they would make a whole lot of money off of it, right, because they would make money on the spread, right, or they would charge fees for the service. So classic kind of intermediary, right? Uniswap and the decentralized exchange model, right, around asset pools, right, means that anyone could create this pools of assets. Well, I have both oranges and bananas, and I'm not using them, so I want to provide them to the marketplace, right? Put them in the store, literally, and allow people to buy or sell them, right? And so I'm just like I would bring my car to go drive for Uber, right? I'm bringing my oranges and bananas and my other assets and putting them onto this marketplace, Uniswap, and allowing people to buy and sell. And now I earn the fees from that, right? And so what is this? I can kind of distill this into, you can be the house, right? So that's how these people make money is how they don't really care how many bananas you buy versus how many oranges. They want there to be perhaps some balance. They don't want to run out, but they don't care. Some people are going to buy bananas. Some people are going to buy oranges. It's fine. What we care about is that people are doing it, because every time someone buys it, I charge a little bit of fee as a market maker. And so all we've done is we've democratized that, just like Uber did, right? And so we're applying these models to the financial sector. And why, and it should kind of click for you if you're listening earlier, right? To the idea of the internet of value, why the financial sector, right? Because if as the internet of value, we are coming after the intermediaries of value, right? Well, all the financial sector does is intermediate value. That's why they exist. So it's a very kind of clear place to start. And I think that's why DeFi has been the first big use case to come out of Web3, to really find product market fit, right, as well. Because, it's a perfect use case, right, for public permissionless Web3, right? Let's take these, value intermediaries and rebuild a system where we don't need them. And therefore we can capture more value to the users, right? So the power of DeFi is that anyone can be the house. If you want to be a lender, you can go be a lender and you can earn that interest rate on Aave. If you want to be a borrower, you can, go be a borrower, and there's some advantages to going to a bank, right? You can borrow permissionlessly. You can do it at a few clicks of a button. It's really convenient. You can monitor it. You can close it out. There are lower fees. That's all great, right? And I did that via Abracadabra, and I've done it on other platforms as well. If you want to pay someone, obviously you can pay someone. If you want to do your payroll, you can set up your payroll on a Web3 app, right, and have it drip out every second, right, and allow people to claim it whenever they want. So all of these, key functions, right, we are recreating. We're not really reinventing the wheel, right? It's still exchange, it's still lending, borrowing. Nothing fundamentally has changed about those things, but we've made them easier, more accessible, and we've lowered the rent in between, right, by removing some of these intermediaries and basically making them into protocols, right? So that's how I would, explain DeFi simply is, you have the opportunity now to participate in these core financial applications, right, as anyone. All you need is capital, and all you need is, a MetaMask.
Yeah, makes sense. I appreciate that. That is also one of the better explanations I've heard, because it's super easy when you think about those three buckets of finance and then how it's being facilitated. Then I assume then Uniswap is also taking a cut of those fees. That's how they function, right?
Yeah. So every protocol will have sort of a fee split where they'll pay the providers of the capital, right? And then they'll also take a protocol fee. And so they still make money. Right. But their protocol fee is, one, it's very transparent, it's programmatic, so you can trust it. And two, it's, it's very competitive, right? Because you have a lot of these protocols. A lot of times, making a competitor is as easy as copying a bunch of the open source code and adding a couple of twists, right? So it's a very, very competitive space that drives down, the protocol fees. And so, we'll see that, protocol fees will tend towards, lower and lower, or, the protocol will have to provide some really big value add to justify higher fees, because, capital in Web3 is very, very, it can move really, really easily. Right?
Very fluid.
Right. Exactly. That's the word I was looking for. Very, very fluid. So yeah, that competition is good for all of us.
Yeah, I might have to bring you back on. I kind of want to do a whole episode on this. This is super interesting for me.
Good.
I do want to wrap up, though. We're hitting the top of the hour, and ask you my traditional closing question, which is, where do you see yourself and Web3 in the next 6 to 12 months? So short, maybe midterm. And then what's your big, hairy vision for Web3 and yourself in 5 to 10 years as you kind of extrapolate your teachings over your years of interacting with it?
Sure. So 6 to 12 months, I'm going to be here. There's a few things I'm working on, which I'll just go really quickly. Continuing to do community building here in Atlanta, and have met a lot of great people, including yourself, that are helping to do that more and more. And it's becoming more and more of a team effort. So we're throwing a conference with Georgia Tech in November, Web3ATL.io. Really encourage you, especially if you're local in Atlanta, to check it out. Tickets are not that much. If you're a student, it's free. We're going to have a bunch of great speakers as well as a hackathon. It'll be one weekend in November. Also, I mentioned I just started a new job as head of product for Rodo blockchain title. So this is a company where we are trying to basically take car titles. So we saw that there's a large data coordination problem in the car industry around the transfer of titles, right? Something that is a paper-based process that has to move through several different parties, dealerships, buyers, sellers, DMVs, lenders, right? All have a hand, in this process, and it's all on paper. It's extremely cumbersome. It results in a lot of tied up working capital because you can't, really sell the car until you have the title in hand to give to the other person, right? So we're trying to take this process and move it onto blockchain, make these car titles into NFTs, essentially, right? And allow you to, have your car title living as an NFT in your wallet, and then when you need to transfer it, you just send a transaction, right? And we have to build, of course, not that simple. We have to build a whole bunch of business rules, make sure the DMV signs off, but hopefully move all of them onto this sort of hybrid permission public blockchain network, to allow to improve this process. So very excited about that. Just started a few weeks ago, and this is going to be a journey. Also, I've started doing a bunch of more formalized DeFi research with a bunch of guys at Georgia Tech. So I have about 4 or 5 analysts working for me as we work to systematically evaluate a bunch of DeFi protocols. And this is more on the investment side, right? We have a long-term thesis about DeFi. And so we're starting to build out more of a framework, a research framework, and then eventually perhaps a fund to, really put our money where our mouth is and help a lot of other people as well, right? Invest into DeFi for the long term. So, if what I said resonated with you about what DeFi is and where it's going and what it enables, and maybe, like you said, maybe we could do another episode about this. That is something you might be interested in. And then thirdly, and I'll just tease us a little bit, I am working on a movie, a little film that is related to crypto. And that is a project I'm very excited about. You heard my origins are in theater and acting and stuff like that. I'm not going to be an actor in it. Those days are gone. But I very, very, excited about this project where hopefully we can tell some of Web3's story in a really interesting way through film medium.
Love that.
Now, the longer term, that's all 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, we got a lot to work on in 6 to 12 months.
Look, I'm not going anywhere. So I'm going to be in this industry. I don't know exactly what I will be doing, but I think I will be continuing to work with startups. That's what I've really enjoyed the most in my journey the past couple of years of trying out a bunch of different stuff. I really love working with startup founders. I really love working on new ideas. I really love, helping participate and building a lot of, Web3 based products that move the needle towards more adoption and success stories, of this tech, which is really what we need, to avert, the worst inclinations of certain regulators, let's say. So I will, I'm going to keep working to that end, and I hope that a lot of you will join me.
Sweet. Well, thank you. That's a great place to wrap, and we'll definitely be having you back on for both DeFi and then also this idea of record keeping. What you're working on now, where blockchain is just one of the tremendous use cases, but the people that or the groups that you have to work with in the government may be a bit slower moving. So I'll be following that closely as you progress. I appreciate your time, Shahar, and glad I got to meet you.
Absolutely. Same to you, Zach. Thank you.
Thanks for joining Web3 with me. Make sure to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review, as it'll help us reach more people. If you want to connect with me personally, you can find me on Twitter @offedge_. Thanks for vibing in the verse with me, and hope you'll join us next time.